Hi, I'm Nancy McGill. Obviously work in the Office of Research Integrity. I do education support, protocol review, QA, QI efforts. Yeah. What else do I do, Helen? A little this and that. And, kind of helping people get through their protocols, making sure that people have all of the information that they need and that all of our records and materials are in place.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Helen Lake Bullock. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Research and Research Integrity, and I am the Director of the Office of Research and Integrity. I'm really here just to keep an eye on Nancy.
Yeah, I get in trouble without her. So today I'm going to talk to you about the IRB, what it does, why it's here. And after I'm done, Helen's going to talk to you about the responsible conduct of research and research misconduct. So I have some goals for today. I want to talk about why IRB review is necessary. So what kind of context and background there is for that. We're going to talk a little bit about what kind of rules and principles apply to IRB review and human research. A little bit about how the process works here at UK, and then also where you can find more information about the process at UK and some of the requirements in general. So a lot of people wonder why they have to do this. Why do I have to deal with the IRB? It's such a hassle. It's a big problem. It takes a lot of time. I don't like it. Well, there are a couple of really good reasons for that. And one of those is historic violations in human research, which has led to the second reason, which is some of the rules and regulations that we have to follow, especially anything that's federally funded. So I'm not going to go really in depth on this timeline. You should, I think Jesse has a copy of this, so you should have access to it if you want to look into it a little bit deeper. But I would like to touch on, there are 3 ethical codes that you'll see in here: the Nuremberg Code, Declaration of Helsinki, and the Belmont Report. So those are all really important and interesting. You might actually want to go and read each of those and kind of think about what kind of differences and similarities there are in all 3. We tend to follow the Belmont Report because it lays out principles rather than directives to follow in human research. And those 3 principles are respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Now, it's important to remember that these principles aren't a hierarchy. They're intended to be taken in balance. So in some situations, one of these might outweigh one of the others. In another situation, it might be reversed. In looking at these principles, the first one we have listed here is respect for persons. And that is very much about people's choices and their ability to make those choices. So this is going to look at things like, this is an autonomous person. They're capable of making their own choices, and we're going to respect the choices that they do make about themselves and their participation in research. But we also see situations where people might not be totally capable of making choices for themselves. And respecting people also accepts that sometimes we have to apply protections for those people. Beneficence is all about the risk and benefit analysis. So what is the risk to people for being in this study? What are the benefits to people, society, and knowledge from the outcomes of this study? Justice is it's all about fairness. It's pretty much what it says on the surface. And then how we apply those. So we look at privacy under respect. We look at informed consent, which you probably will hear a lot about if you ever interact with human research. It's kind of a big component. And we also look at vulnerable populations. Now, when we talk about vulnerable populations in terms of research and IRB review, it's not saying that those people are necessarily weak, but the connotation there is that they are vulnerable to coercion and undue influence. So there might be some pressure at play that affects their decision about participating in the research. Justice, the applications for that, it's all about, where are the risks and benefits distributed? Are there people who would benefit from the study who aren't included? Are there people who are excluded who might benefit? Then beneficence, again, risk-benefit balance. So we're looking at, can we maximize the benefit, minimize the harms, and are there some safeguards that we can put in place? For example, let's say that you yourselves, your students, and one of your professors wants to include you in their research study. One of the really common safeguards we see for that in a lot of research here at UK is to not have professors directly recruiting their own students, because, you know, if your professor comes to you and says, I want you to be in my study, you might feel pressured, like you have to do that because they're your teacher. But aside from the principles, we also have a lot of rules and regulations that apply to research. The common rule and the vulnerable subject regulations are part of the Department for Health and Human Services, and that's primarily what we look at in the IRB office, but we also see a lot of Food and Drug Administration. So we have regulations applying to research here from the FDA. We have privacy regulations, so that's HIPAA, FERPA, which governs your educational records, GDPR if you're doing anything in Europe. There are also state laws, university policies, other states and countries' laws might apply if you're doing interstate or international research. So for any given study, you might have this kind of layer cake of different rules and regulations and laws that apply to what your study activities are. The common rule that I mentioned, it is kind of the big regulation that we deal with in our office, and that covers how the IRB functions. So what gets reviewed, what kinds of review there are, what types of activities fit into those review types. It also covers the composition of an IRB. What kind of people do we have to have reviewing research for that review to be ethical and valid? And then we have things like when some requirements can be waived. You might not always have to get a signature on a consent form to have somebody in your study, for example. And then we also have ongoing review and oversight. So once a study is approved, we do check-ins and annual reviews and things like that. The vulnerable populations that I mentioned earlier, there are several examples of different types of vulnerable populations. People who might be in a position where they feel pressured or coerced to be in a study, even if they might not really want to. And so some of the examples here, we have prisoners, children, and then fetuses, pregnant women, and newborns. So those are the three categories that have some very specific requirements and criteria laid out in the federal regulations for them to be involved in studies. But then you move on to some more general categories, people with impaired decision-making ability. So that could be someone with a developmental delay, that could be an older person with cognitive impairment, or that could be a really kind of fluctuating or temporary situation. So sometimes people who've experienced physical or emotional trauma, for example, might be incapable of making some decisions at one moment, and then a little while later, you could go back and get their permission for something. We also see patients, students, like I mentioned, and a newer consideration is people who are educationally and economically disadvantaged. And this is just important to keep in mind as, you know, these are groups of people that might have extra considerations. And these are things that IRB needs to think about when they make their decisions about what can and can't happen in a study. So we've talked about a little bit about some of the rules and regulations and those ethical principles. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what really is human research and what does the IRB review. So we have some defined categories, regulatory definitions that we adhere to help us figure out what is research and what is a human subject. And this is slightly simplified from the regulations, but I've kind of got the key points on this outlined and highlighted. So for research, what we're looking at, is it a systematic investigation? And will it contribute to generalizable knowledge? And there are lots of ways that activities can meet these criteria. So if you are doing a survey and you're going to publish that survey, generally that's considered a systematic investigation that's going to contribute to generalizable knowledge because you're collecting information and then you are sending it out there, publishing it, promoting it, trying to get it into the general eye. Now, the definition of a human subject, that one can be a little more complex because some people kind of think that, well, if I am going out and I am talking to a person, or if I am meeting with a person, if I am doing medical interventions with a person, and that's a human subject. And they forget that it also includes just people's information. So if you're looking at identifiable information about a person, then and you're using that information for research, then that's also a human subject. And that can be, it's sometimes a little hard to define, because we see a lot of information sometimes with computer sciences where they don't realize that, they can tell who it came from. They're asking questions about people and behavior, and they're really doing human subjects research and might not entirely realize it. But we do have help. We have a not human research determination form. And if, we advise people, if you're ever in question about whether something you want to do would be human research or not human research, go to our website, enter the information in the form, and submit it. And what happens after that is someone in our office will review that information and reach out and let you know if they need additional information to make a determination. And then it will come to someone like our IRB chairs or one of their designees, and they'll give you an official determination. Yes, this is human subject research and you need to submit it via this method, or you'll get a letter that says this isn't human subjects research and you're good to go. And that's important because if you do something, if you conduct a research activity or you conduct an activity and it is determined later on that it was human subjects research, you might kind of be stuck because we can't do review retroactively. We can't review things that have already happened and improve them. So that has to happen up front. So let's say that you go through this process, you get a determination that your activity does constitute human research, and you have to submit it to the IRB. What might that process look like? Well, after figuring out the research and human subjects components, we have 3 different types of review. And these kind of are steps up from the other in terms of risk and complexity and oversight. So exempt is a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of people get really confused about this because they think it's exempt. I don't have to have IRB review. But what that really means is that it's exempt from some of those federal regulations, but not everything. We still expect people to conduct research ethically and respectfully. So when you have exempt review, that applies to things that are really minimal risk. It's super benign types of research. It has to fit into specific criteria and categories, and those are, again, outlined in federal regulations, which you'll hear us talking a lot about because that governs everything we do. And then, you have one person who reviews that most of the time. We have consultants come in and help out if their expertise is needed. And then there's not really an annual review that goes along with that. Once the exempt study is approved, it's okay for 6 years. The caveat is if something changes, we ask people to let us know and we can help them, record that. We have it all documented and it doesn't kick it out of that category. The next level up is called expedited. And that's because it is a kind of lower level of review and oversight than the full or convened board review. So with expedited studies, again, these are minimal risk, so really low risk to participants. One person reviews these, consultant if necessary, if we need their expertise. But the big difference here is that the categories are different for expedited review than for exempt. And the annual administrative review that you see here, that's we do an annual review for those. It's a little check-in every year. And if you don't do that, your study expires and you have to stop. There are also some limitations in exempt, so you can't really do a lot of vulnerable subjects research in that category, but you can do some of that in expedited. And then the highest level of review, the convened or full board review. This would be anything that is a higher risk level or something that just doesn't fit into the exempt or expedited criteria. Sometimes that does happen. So this is where you go to the IRB, the whole board meets, they talk about the study, they raise any questions or issues, and then they make their determinations. Now, the full board review has a much more involved annual checkup. It has, you can see 22 questions opposed to the 4 for the annual administrative review on the expedited. And it has a little bit more kind of oversight and involvement from the IRB as a whole. So as far as the process and what it might look like from start to finish, you start with an application, and that is through our online system, IRB. And so you would go and gather all of your information, all of your materials, put those together into an application that you submit through our system. And when that comes in, it doesn't go directly to the IRB. That would first come to a staff person like me, and we'll look it over. We'll kind of screen that application, let you know if there's anything missing, let you know if there's something the IRB tends to look for. We kind of advise people, especially students, just to let you know, this is what the regulations say about this aspect of your study. Here are comments we typically see from IRB reviewers on this type of research. And there's, a little bit of back and forth, getting that complete and ready for the IRB reviewer. So then after it's ready, ORI staff will send it on to the IRB, and they will then review it, make a decision. And a lot of the time they require changes at this point. I know for younger researchers, for students, if they encounter this, it can be kind of alarming, but it's really just part of the process. So the IRB requires changes, and then it comes back to ORI staff again, and we will kind of translate their comments, make sure it's understandable for you, and send that back out to the PI. And then at this point, there might also be a little bit of back and forth, because once you made your changes, those have to go back to the IRB again for a final approval. So once we get through all of the back and forth, the required changes, you're good. You get your approval letter, and then you can start your study. I put this up here because these are the criteria for approval the IRB have to certify a study meets before they can approve it. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do just want to put this up here because I think there's sometimes a little bit of a perception that review boards, they're obstructive. They're a hurdle to overcome. And really, they're there to help you make sure that you're meeting all of these criteria that are laid out in the federal regulations. So these are what they have to check off on, and they do try to do that very diligently. After approval, once you've started your study, you're not just going forever and you don't ever have to do anything with the IRB again. If something changes, that happens all the time. We get so many modification requests. Once you get into a study, you might find something doesn't work and you have to change your process a little bit. That's fine. You just have to submit that. We update it, and then the IRB will say, yes, that's okay, or no, you need to change this a little bit to be ethical. We also have a lot of different types of follow-up reports, unanticipated problems, something goes wrong, protocol violations, you did something you didn't say you were going to do. You get your annual check-ins, and then we do have quality assurance and quality improvement, which is another part of what I do, which are just kind of check-ins. So we do, we'll go out and we'll work with a researcher, review their records, make sure they're doing everything according to the protocol they submitted. And, that's kind of a very short, condensed version of what the process looks like and what the IRB is all about. And if you want more information, we do have a bunch of resources. So we have a getting started page, and that walks you through step 0, which is, do I need to get IRB review? all the way through to the end, which is this post-approval monitoring with modification requests and unanticipated problems and those kinds of, after the study's approved, what do you need to do? We have training help. So I know that Jesse has had you guys do your CITI training, your HSP and RCR, right?
Hopefully they will have completed it.
Hopefully you've completed that. But if you haven't, or if you know somebody who does need to do that, we have a training help page with walkthroughs and FAQs and how to get that done. We have a whole little section of our website all about informed consent, the kinds of forms you need, the kind of information that you have to have in those, which again is laid out in the federal regulations. And then we also have a document that lays out PI responsibilities. And those are the expectations that the university has and that the IRB has for how PIs will engage with their research and with the institution. We also have a lot of different ways you can reach out and contact us. We have office hours. We usually do those once a month in the summer, twice a month during the semester. Those are just kind of informal, drop in, come with questions, do request a consultation. So if you have some things that's specific and in depth you want to discuss, you can get a one-on-one consultation. We have a contact page. You can find all of our staff, including Helen, and bug her. No, don't bother Helen, bug me instead. You've got my contact information up here. So if you do have questions or you want to discuss some study activities that you are thinking about doing, give us a call, email, consultation, reach out and let me know. Do you guys have any questions for me about the process, about how it works, about resources, anything?
What are some examples of like the exempt IRBs?
Oh, so a lot of what we get with exempt is we have record reviews. So if any of you have ever had medical treatment at UK, there's a possibility that your information could be used for research, because we have medical record reviews that happen all the time here. Well, they'll look at, say, a specific disease, and we have all this information available, and they'll come to the IRB and they'll say, I want to look at this specific disease. I want to find information about, outcomes, say, for this specific treatment. And can I go and use medical records to do that? And they will justify why they want to do that without getting people's permission. And they will, give us all of the information about what kind of information they're going to collect, how they'll use it, etc. And the IRB will say, sure, that sounds great, or no, you should adjust some things. We also see surveys and interviews come through as exempt. There are some observations that can come through, and we have, tools to help you navigate that. Anything else? No? Okay, well, I will turn it over to Helen, who's going to talk to you about responsible conduct of research.
All right, guys, I'm excited that all of you have taken the RCR training because you will be able to talk to me about this, right? All of you that are falling asleep now, but all right, okay. So I want to talk to you about this. It is a very important subject matter. We've had issues, as have a lot of universities, where people are conducting research that is not, it's slightly inappropriate. I guess I'll say that diplomatically. But anyway, so responsible conduct research and scholarly activity is founded on, you're honest in your research, right? You report anything honestly. You're accurate with your recordings. You are efficient. You don't waste resources. And then you want to be objective, because, to go in there with an hypothesis that you're trying to make your research fit is really not being objective, right? So the areas that UK is concentrating on, there are lots of areas you can pick, but these are the areas that we feel are the most important, and that's mentoring. You should have good mentors so that they teach you how to do appropriate research, avoid conflicts of interest, make sure you manage your data appropriately, that your data should be reproducible. I'll go into these a little bit more detail, and then that it's peer reviewed, whether that's in your lab or by a journal, or if you apply for a grant, right? So any issues with any of these areas can lead to research misconduct, right? So here's the definition for research misconduct, right? It's the FFP, fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. So who's going to tell me what fabrication is? I'm sorry. Yeah, there you go. Very good. All right. How about falsification? Yeah, right. So you have results, but you're trying to make them look a different way or better or whatever. Okay, plagiarism, guys. I know that's a big one. Yeah, there you go. All right. So test, everyone. The blot, the Western blot there on the top left-hand side, what can you tell me if there's an issue with that? And if so, what is it? And what category would it fit in? Have to look closely. How about if you look at lane 2 and 5? Does it look like they came from that gel, or does it look like maybe it was cropped in there? Yeah, right? Yeah. Yes. That is not the right answer. All right, so let's say this is a crop job. What category is this? Is it? Do you have results already? Right, you see the difference there, right? So if you didn't have anything and I just threw up something I made up with a PowerPoint or whatever, then you're fabricating. But here, those two lanes, they're trying to put something in there to make that tell you something different, right? And so the way we do these kind of analysis, you go by pixel points, right? So you blow this up huge, and then you can really see, you know, that that's something that's been put in there. All right, so we got the Einstein. What is this? Pretty easy, right? What's the issue there? Is there an issue? What's the issue? Right. It, you know, it's rewritten kind of, but it's really close. It's as if they came up with this, and that would be plagiarism. So the bottom thing here, let's say you claim you have a transgenic mouse and you write all about it, but in the end, you know, those mice never existed. There you go, fabrication. We've had that here at UK actually. So just an illustration of what we're talking about here. Okay, so here's an illustration of what can happen. Worst case scenario, right? We had these faculty members and their laboratory personnel that engaged in not so great research, and it got published everywhere. Okay, and these researchers are no longer with UK. And so this sort of behavior affects, so if you're in a lab, let's say in the lab that you're in now, this happens, what do you think happens to you? You're going like, right, it depends, right? Now, if you have no dealings with the process, you know, with the research misconduct process, then the university is good about trying to find you another place to go. But let's say you're 3 years into your PhD, or, you know, you're into your master's a few years. Is that great? No, it's not. It's not great at all, right? So it affects a lot of people just having a person conduct poor research. All right, so UK has cases ongoing. We have some right now. It's, you know, in the past few years, we've had a few. We get allegations, and, you know, a lot of times they're unfounded. Like it's a mistake, or somebody didn't realize, you know, what it was trying to show, or disgruntled employees, right? So what we go by is good faith allegations, because you could always be mad at somebody else, right, and accuse them of whatever, and that is not appropriate. All right, so it's not just the PI and the lab that could be affected. So NIH claims that what the cost to them is about 400,000. This is a few years old, but you know, they're granting that research money and it's being basically wasted, right? Because you're not conducting research that is deserving of that money or what you claim that you were going to do with the money. For us here, it's about $500,000 to sort these things out. And the reason why is because they usually last a couple of years. We have, so an inquiry takes 2 faculty members to look into the matter, and then an investigation is 3 full-time faculty members. These faculty members have a job at UK, so this is on top of what they're already doing, right? We have to bring in legal counsel, our office, security. Sometimes people aren't happy about this, so you have to bring in security. Always bring in computer science because they copy computers, your computers in the lab, any kind of instrumentation that has data on it, they copy that. I mean, it is really thorough, and so it costs the university a lot of money to go through this. And then, of course, if you're a PI, you're not going to come out so well, right? Usually, if it goes to federal ORI, you might be banned from getting grants from 3 to 5 years to lifetime debarment to prison. You know, it just depends on how severe the cases are. The biggest issue, though, is what? Is you're relying on research data for medical treatment, for product development, for all kinds of things. So if you have errors out there, you know, it just spreads through. Like you said, the quote from,
Mother Teresa.
yeah, there you go, ripple effect, right? Because you trust these references that you're looking into, and so it's like a virus that spreads in the research community. Okay, and so UK has not had to pay back any grant money yet, but other people have. So you see Duke had to pay back $112 million plus. That is a huge dent into research funding for that institution. Harvard paid back 10. So in these cases, I would like to think that we do a really good job at UK. I think we do. We have a good rapport with the federal ORI, Office of Research Integrity. Some of these issues are, if you are an institution and you're trying to sweep some of this under the rug, that is not going to please the federal government, right? And so sometimes that is, you know, they're going to show you that this is not acceptable and you should have been upfront and honest about this. And so, all right, so let's talk about these things. So who has a good mentor? Everybody should be raising your hand, right? Or you're going to get in trouble. No, but like, what's a good mentor? What can you tell me something that they do that you think is a good mentor? Yeah, there you go. That's a really good one. Something else? This is your time to brag. I'm going to have to report back. No. But what are some other things? Like, what about if you're saying availability, but like you want to talk to them about your career or a path that you might want to take. Is that a good mentor? Yeah. You know, they should respect you. They should give you the time. They should communicate with you. You know, you might have lab meetings. You might have, meetings, personal meetings that, you know, how do I go through this? Or how do I, you know, what's my best way forward? How do I talk to Nancy? She's, you know, she's impossible. No.
So
Yeah. No. But you should have somebody that's helping you out. And I think you do. Okay. So what about the conflict of interest? So what's another one besides financially? Is pretty obvious here, but what's another one that could happen, do you think? So let's say your uncle is running the lab you're in. What is that? What kind of conflict could that be? Because they're throwing money at you. All right, they're paying you more than other people. What kind of conflict would that be? Yeah, like a personal conflict of interest, sure. So those are the two things that we have to watch out for, right? When we do research in any sort of way. So what's a financial one, do you think?
Well, yeah, it was part of the research process. I don't know if it happened.
That's fine. That's fine.
I thought it was slightly conflict of interest that a professor had embedded with the class that we didn't know what to be selecting
Okay.
So it's like, they don't know how that can be used. It benefits the researcher, the professor. maybe.
Okay, so now you're sort of trickling into non-compliance, right? Which is in our office, and it's not the same, right? So non-compliance is you've got a human subjects protocol, and and they're not complying with what the IRB has said, or even gotten an IRB approval. That's non-compliance. So when we're over here, we're research misconduct. That's more like the data you've collected, that how you're managing this. And so it is possible, class projects, I divert a little there, but class projects, it depends on what they are, whether they need IRB approval or not. I can't tell you in this particular case whether it's that they didn't need it or if it's something that, they should have informed students about. But if they come into the IRB or, to ORI, and they're definitely going to ask them, did you get consent? Did you tell them what the purpose was? And if they did not, it is unlikely that they would get approval, which means if a journal asks, do you have IRB approval? They would have to say no. And we couldn't do it retroactively. So that's how that, that's how that works. So, okay, all right, other financial. What do you think about a medical doctor that's, he's lecturing for Merck, and he's doing some research at the university which involves a Merck product? Is that a conflict? Yes, of course, he's lecturing. He gets $100,000 a year. All right, let me add something. All right, so not only he lectures for Merck, there's a Merck product, and there is a Abbott product. He's a little more, yeah. So, yeah. Right. So those are the kind of financial conflict of interest that could exist, right? We have a lot of medical doctors who, they're lecturer because there's a product and it could be great, but you have to watch that conflict. And so you would have to disclose, like if you have an IRB protocol, for instance, and you do research, you disclose that in the informed consent form, and or you remove the person from actually prescribing, one product over another. Right. Yeah.
So what if it was the other way around? So they were lecturing about the product, but they couldn't, hey, look, I'm not saying they put this company or anything, not personal, it's different, but being sponsored by me. If they said that at the
So I think if they say that at the beginning, you're informed, and then you can make that decision and think, well, I don't really trust him because he's being paid, and I think maybe that project is not as good. You're informed, right? I think that's okay. They would have to look, and again, then it could be a vulnerable person. So let's say your judgment is impaired, or you can't, like an Alzheimer's patient that can make a decision today, but maybe not tomorrow, and then it rolls into, and are you in prison? Like, do you have can you choose whether, you can have this product or the other? I mean, a lot of other things come into play, but informed consent is the key, right? You need to tell people.
And that's kind of where you get into safeguards and managing.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on. Data management. So talk to me about data management. How are you managing data in the lab? What are you doing? Do you have a notebook? Do you have computers? Do you have instruments? Are they meeting with you regularly to talk to you? Do you use lab archives? What's happening? Are you supposed to have the raw data, even if you've made figures in Illustrator? Are you supposed to have it readily available, right? Okay. So you need to keep that in mind going forward when you have your own, when you're going to be getting the Nobel Prize and everything, so nothing comes back to haunt you, because we have an issue with people, and that's part of this responsible conduct of research. Data management has been a problem, right? We have a data retention policy at UK. You have to keep all your data for 5 years. If you leave, you have to ask permission to take a copy, or you take the original and you leave a copy. But that data should be available like this. And a lot of people have not had that, right? And so, you know, they might go, hey, come into my office. I have 400 notebooks. Feel free to look for the data that you need. That is not readily available, right? So just make sure you know where your data is. And it also should not be, you know, when it comes to human subjects, if you put your data in your pickup truck or your car, you're driving home, and overnight there's a break-in, and now somebody's sitting there with human subjects data on their, you know, on the computer they stole or they jumped or whatever. We have that happen. Those are the unanticipated problems that Nancy was talking about, right? But now you have a whole lot of people's data out there. So you have to be really careful to manage the data, right? Okay. What about reproducibility? Anybody talk to you about this? So let's say I'm sitting in Dr. Cass's lab, right? And somebody else is over at, I don't know, Dr. Spear's lab. We ordered reagents from Sigma or where have you, right? I make up the mixes and we're doing the same. So do you think that could influence it because two different people make up the original solutions? Or I order from Abbott, you order from Sigma, right? But you are correct that the trends should be the same. You're not going to get the exact numbers, you're not going to get that, but you are definitely going to see a trend, right? So that's, you know, reproducibility is not an exact science, but it should definitely be, you know, you should see similarities, okay? So NIH in January is speaking about reproducibility and data management. In January, NIH is requiring that any grant that you apply for, you have to talk about data management. Like you have to tell your methods, where you're storing the data, how you're sharing the data. It's getting very, very detailed. So we're working at UK to come up with key storage areas, because you have to tell NIH where you're keeping it. We're having to tell, our researchers are having to tell them exactly how they're managing their data. And so that's a really big one that's on the table. You might hear about it, but in January that will come into effect. So everyone will have to comply with that, which is it's a good thing. Okay, peer review. Give me an example of peer review besides this. How about, do they meet with you in their lab? Do you discuss your data at all? Because you need to be talking to your mentor, the other people in the lab, to make sure that what you're doing is okay. You know, also it's the ripple effect, right? Because if we don't have peer review, bad science could get out there, right? Is peer review perfect? Right? What about the picture I showed you where they had corrupt things in? Research misconduct is everywhere, right? People publish things that are inaccurate or inappropriate every day. So peer review is a great tool, but it is not perfect, right? So anyway, but the, you know, journals are doing a better job. They now have, so the vice president for research just subscribed to Authenticate, right? Which should prevent plagiarism. At least you plug it in. I guess maybe you guys are familiar with Turnitin through the library. Yeah, it's a souped up version of Turnitin. It's called Authenticate. And so you do that for grant, journal articles, what have you. And so then at least you can look at for plagiarism. You have to be, reviewers get busy, you know, that's a side gig for people. They get articles sent to them because their expertise in the field. But if they don't look and they don't pixel pattern every figure or whatever, they're not going to know, and they don't have time. You know, they're looking for, you know, overall good science. But so that's how things sneak through and gets realized. But there is Retraction Watch is a website that goes through a lot of articles and realizes a lot of issues, and they will write about it. And so ours, Dr. Xian Zhang, got published in that Retraction Watch website as well, and they found all these issues that their publications had. And there's also PubPeer, another website where, you know, you get sort of revealed, if you will. So anyway, all right, well, I appreciate your attention, and we do really appreciate you guys for being research ambassadors. It's a great, great program. So if you have any questions or anything, I'm happy to take them now, or if a situation comes up, please call us. You know, we have a hotline at UK. It's a research misconduct hotline. You don't have to say who you are. You don't have to, you can just fill out the form. It's anonymous. That's in fact how a lot of our allegations come. People don't want to say who they are, but they're concerned about the science. And so they put it in there. You can talk to us over the phone. You can meet in my office, anything that people need, but I'm just giving you that resource. Otherwise, this website has a lot of great information in this area, which honestly, I hope I never have to see any of you in my office for the reasons of research misconduct, right? Because I will say, remember, I talked to you. But anyway, so any questions? No, do good work out there. Make UK proud, guys. Thank you.